Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all here in Zoom world. We're getting so used to these virtual presentations. I'm not sure if you're enjoying them any more than I am. I'm still looking forward to getting back to campus. I just wanted to say a quick hi. I'm going to pull up and share my screen very shortly. So I won't be able to see all of you all the time. So please use the chat if there's any questions or comments. I think it's always more useful if there's, dialogue in the time. And this is a small enough group that we could even engage in dialogue along the way. So that would be lovely and make us maybe feel a little more connected than just staring at a screen again. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, hold on one second here. I need to first do notes. All right. So we're going to have to stop that. I need to get my notes over here first, and they're not cooperating. There we go. Now we're good to go. All right. So I'm really glad to be here with you all today and hope to learn along with you a little bit about kind of what you're experiencing and seeing with students. I will first introduce myself. We'll talk a little bit about some of the goals for today, and then we'll just kind of move through the material. So we're here to talk about students in distress, and particularly thinking about, interesting, I still have UB on there. So I just moved here 6 months ago from the University of the Bahamas, and I did a similar presentation. I see a typo on my first page that I'm going to correct. So this is for U of M faculty, really identifying and responding to students in distress. I'm Michelle Bettin. Like I said, I'm relatively new here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist as well as a licensed independent clinical social worker. I'm the associate director of our student counseling services here on campus. I have worked at this is my 5th university, as well as some community mental health centers, hospital settings, private practice. So I've been in mental health across the country and even with outside of our country for a long time. So I'm really passionate about this work and supporting students, and think that faculty really are key advocates, have a key role in helping us really identify and work with students when there's distress coming up. So I won't make this real formal, but we're just going to talk about some of briefly the trends in college mental health across the country and even internationally, some symptoms or signs that you can use to identify distress in your students. We're going to talk about your role, what that could look like, and that really varies depending on the type of students you have, the type of classes, and the type of relationship, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what resources are available on campus, and then we're going to talk about self-care. I feel like always, and I put that in quotes because I think people think of self-care as like bubble baths or spa days, and I think we're in a time and a year where self-care is really about being in tune with how we're doing mentally, emotionally, and in our bodies. So really checking in with ourselves and doing well by ourselves in these really difficult times. And again, I'd love to hear about some of your experiences and opinions and thoughts on kind of what's going on from your perspective here at U of M. So because I do really tough work, I love comedy, humor, and comics. So this is just one I found online that says, here's the therapist saying, I installed a GPS app on your phone. Use it to find a magical land where the world still makes sense. And I put that up here because that's what we're hearing from students. There is this almost sense of where am I? How am I supposed to be? This doesn't fit with what my image of what college was going to be like. So there's a lot of distress just related to things not being how they had hoped for or how they thought they might be. And here are trends. So these trends are from largely 2019 data. So this isn't even covering a lot of what I talked about today will be from before the pandemic started and all the racial trauma and everything that's been going on in this country that are things that are impacting the mental health of our students. But this is important just to note that we've been seeing this over the past decade, that we're seeing more and more students with mental illness or prior mental health treatment that are students on campuses. We also are seeing students with more severe issues, so maybe more complicated diagnosis, more complicated mental health issues. Some of that we believe is related to the advancements in psychotropic medications, that there are students who are on college campuses now that may not have been able to do that in the past. We also know that more students are seeking mental health services, and that's good news on one hand in that it reflects there's more awareness, there may be some decrease in stigma that students are willing to do that. The downside of that is it leaves places like student counseling services and other student mental health providers really struggling to keep up with the demand. So the demand is by far greater than our capacity. So we do a lot of referring off campus as well and getting creative with groups. This is really important to me. The students we're seeing, I talk about threat to self characteristics. And what that means is things like self-injury. So that number of almost 30%, that's the number of, these are students though that come to counseling center, right? So these are students who are seeking services, but that statistic is saying that of the students we see, there's about 30% that are or have engaged in self-injury. There's almost 40% who have had serious suicidal ideation. There's about 11% with suicide attempts at some point, and about 40% of the counseling center students have reported they had suicidal ideation in the last 2 weeks. So this is something that is really prevalent in this country. So this is from college counseling centers across the country. This isn't just the University of Minnesota, but this reflects what I've seen on many campuses. And we do see this rising. And I worry about what 2020 looks like, just based on the hopelessness, the uncertainty, the fear, all of that going on. And then kind of here's the last point, is a plug for why are we talking about this? So why are faculty talking about mental health? Because counseling and mental health is really connected to academics. So we know that the students who get counseling services, they do better academically, and their retention rates are greater. So that's why even we hear President Gable talking about mental health as a priority. It helps us with retention and with success of our students. So it is really, I'm glad that we're recognizing how important that is. So I'll only do I'm kind of a data nerd, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but I'm gonna do just a little bit more about some of the trends. This is again 2019. This is from the Association of University College Counseling Center Directors. They do an annual survey. This covers 562 counseling centers across the US. Some of them are in Canada and some other countries, but largely US. What's important about this? So again, these are students at counseling centers. These numbers are higher. And this again is 2019, this isn't even 2020, but I feel like I know those are elevations in the anxiety and depression, the prevalence. Even though if you look at students across colleges, not counseling center students, you will often see those three. Those are the most common things that we hear from students. There's anxiety, depression, and stress. And the rates can be pretty high, and the symptoms can be pretty debilitating for students, but that's why we're here to help with coping skills. So first of all, kind of helping students understand what's going on and then helping them figure out what would be helpful. So what is the impact of mental health symptoms on students? We talked a bit about academics. That is for sure that the last bullet point on this slide says, and this is common, when you ask students what are their top reasons for struggling with academics or having problems with their academic performance, they'll often, within those top reasons, will be psychological or emotional related symptoms. So that's what they tell us about that. Going back up to the top one, there's lots of reasons students have distress. It could be from family issues, it could be from multiple demands, it could be being a single parent, it could be, there's all kinds of reasons that contribute to the symptoms. And then we know that when students when the stress overwhelms their coping, they really can have difficulty just managing all of it. And then we'll see the academic difficulties and other stress symptoms. So that's our goal, is to get in there as soon as possible and support those students to learn some coping skills and understand what's going on. Now, this is another visual about the impact of mental health on students. And it says #mental illness feels like, and in that kind of thought bubble of all those people is everyone else has it together except me. And this is something we hear a lot, and this could age me to my generation, but I also think that it's true that this is somewhat a reflection of all like growing up on social media. So these a lot of our college students, they're constantly comparing, so they know how messy their insides feel, you know, how the problems, the struggles, the stress. So they're comparing what they consider kind of messy insides with everyone else's shiny outsides, because what people are posting are the best, happiest kind of parts of their life overall. So that's something we see, and we try to kind of normalize and connect with students. I also think about the isolation right now, and we're hearing that a lot from students. So the job of young adults is really to connect with peers their age, to understand who they are, and they're not able to do that in the same way. So I'm guessing this kind of feeling on their own, this isolation, is also potentially making this worse for students. And so I have a college student of my own. So I think of college students as the young adults. And I kind of think of us as the staff and faculty. We're like the grown adults. We're the full adults. And that in some ways, it's our job to really normalize that life can be a struggle at times, that distress is real, that emotions matter, and really talking plainly and non-judgmentally about that whenever possible. All right. So I put this in here because depending on different environments, and I think based on different departments of faculty, I think there's different opinions. So I'm curious if anyone has thoughts or ideas about, is this faculty's role? Like, should faculty be involved in addressing mental health issues? And then I also just want to name that I think this can also be affected by people's comfort or discomfort approaching students about their distress or possible symptoms. And what I mean by that, so I've seen in some universities say the psychology faculty are really active, involved, and feel very comfortable with this, whereas faculty from maybe some of the sciences or kind of STEM faculty have been more likely to reach out and say, I have no idea what to do with this. This isn't a conversation I'm used to having. So I don't see the chat, Joan. I don't know if anything's coming up in the chat about ideas about this.
I haven't seen anything in the chat yet, but we invite you to go ahead and put comments or questions in the chat.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's talk about this. And again, I think it depends on the student that you have, so what type of relationship you have with that student. If this is a student you've had in 5 or 10 classes, if this is a student that, so I think all of those things really matter.
Well, and I also think it depends on the institution though too, because I've been at other institutions in teaching prior to here at the U, and I was told specifically, if a student's in distress, that just refer them out, refer them to the counseling services, and don't try to get involved as much as possible. And I teach in a mental health program here. And so I think, especially with our students though too, I think they're a lot more open and self-disclose a lot more in our classes in general though too, especially around mental health concerns. So they seem to be more kind of motivated to seek out help though too from faculty members.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both of those parts are really important. One is the recognition that, so when we talk about playing a key role, that doesn't mean that you're playing a therapist to your students, because that would not be a reasonable expectation. It's about how might you, and we'll talk more about specifics, but if you notice something happening with a student, do you even say to them, it looks like something's, I'm wondering if you're okay. I wonder if you're struggling. I've noticed things have changed. I wonder if you want some information about some campus resources. And I'll also be sending a flyer to everyone, or I'll drop it in the chat that has some campus resources just to have that. It could even be passing on that flyer to that student. So that's what it is. And again, in another program, so if you're in a mental health program or a program where you develop really close relationships, those conversations would look really different than, one-time student in a class or a student you've just met. Any other comments? And we're such a small group, it feels fine for people to kind of jump in too.
I see a couple of comments in the chat. One is from Dave, and he says, hardly a term goes by that I don't see someone struggling.
Yeah.
And I teach an online class in engineering, and a lot of my students work as well as go to school, and they seem to be particularly prone to having life balancing issues.
Sure. And I think that's very common. Again, so a lot of symptoms happen when the demands overwhelm the coping. So when you add layers of, job, family, school, that would increase the chance that someone might struggle.
So just to piggyback off of what Dave said, because we have a lot of students that, are usually working too, typically through our programs. But I think a big thing that we're seeing right now is just the immense amount of layoffs and furloughs. A lot of our students are working in the restaurant industry, for example, on the side. So a lot of them have really been impacted with the pandemic though, and really kind of struggling with that financial stability aspect.
Right. And probably both sides, that either there's a financial impact or a risk impact, right? So either they're not working or they're at risk if they are working, which is, yeah, difficult. Any other comments about this?
Tony, oh, I'm sorry. Did someone want to jump in? I'm just reading off here in the chat. Tony said that he thinks that faculty can play a role in making referrals.
Yeah, and I think someone was saying that as well. Not expecting faculty to be experts in the field of mental health, but knowing what resources are available on campus to direct students to, and hopefully students will feel, be appreciative that if someone recognized something and know that there's some help that they can find on campus.
That's right. That's right. It's like really being that connector. Yeah. Roy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I think there's merit in being familiar with the resources. I've walked students over prior institution to the counseling center and just, saying, hey, would you like to talk to someone? And just, knowing the office staff walking over somehow normalizes that it's okay.
It's okay.
And such. So I think there's a benefit there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's another thing too. And again, it's different working remotely, but we're hopeful that soon we'll be back on campus, that walking over will start happening again. So that's for real. And this next slide kind of taps on, I think, is it Anthony or Tony?
You can call me Tony. Tony's fine.
Okay, I think that's what you referred to. So you had mentioned something that's similar to this. This is really, first of all, I love Maya Angelou, but the quote from her is try to be a rainbow in someone's cloud. And that's nice and beautiful, but it also fits with the research on resilience, that we know that when folks feel like there's one person, it only takes one person that shows care or that kind of shows that unconditional positive regard. When people feel that adds to their resilience. So it is important for faculty in that way to say, hey, I'm noticing, I'm not the expert on this, but I notice something's changed. I care about you. Can I help you with some resources? So that's why that slide is in there. This is a little different probably in remote learning, but nonetheless, I feel like my belief is you all have the most contact and the most data about students. You have the regular contact, you have the most face-to-face time with them, right, when we're in regular learning environments. But even on Zoom, you often are developing relationships. You see them day to day or week to week. And there's the part of, I think faculty are facilitators of cultural norms. So when faculty are acknowledging that distress is real with students, it can help decrease stigma around that. So all of these are little ways. And we're going to get to real specific things to do and specific resources, but I'm first going to talk a little bit about this, because this is another thing that can help you all think about that difference. So there's crisis and there's distress. And in general, when there's crisis, this is when you absolutely need an expert involved. So that would be things like, when a student is really a threat to themselves or others. So that means when there are suicidal gestures, attempts, statements, students are threatening or gesturing or actively aggressive or assaulting others. You have someone destroying a classroom. You have someone, so I use these are clinical terms, psychotic or delusional behaviors. That's really when a student is kind of like lost touch with reality, maybe not making a lot of sense. So these are kind of those extremes. So this is the time where you would want to, either call, and so I just want to name that in these times, calling the police, particularly with students with marginalized identities, is something we want to do carefully. There are times that's our first approach, if we really are worried about immediate safety. There are other things we can do. We can call, there's some other teams that we'll talk about. This is very rare. So that's the fortunate thing, that usually it's not the severe. There might be indications. So I've heard at many universities where faculty hear in essays or in maybe they've even seen posts from students about suicidal ideation. That would be a time to either call us for consultation. So that's different than someone's in the middle of an attempt, right? That's kind of an emergency behavior. But nonetheless, these are crisis things that you need professionals. Other signs of distress, so this might be just recognizing or a conversation with a student. So just noting changes, and that could be in attendance, in performance, in hygiene, really reactive moods, a lot of anxiety, panic, hyperactivity, Another one, and I actually have heard from quite a few faculty this semester where they're worried about students because they just dropped off. They're just not showing up for online classes. So that would be a sign, like something's going on. We don't know what that is, but it might be worth, you know, an email, a conversation, you know, what's going on? Do you need any support? And in those cases, that's when really it's more in that distress zone is where you all could play a role. You know, unless again, there are some folks that have particular skills that feel like they can be more directive with students who are in more high risk areas. But if you notice distress, it depends. If it's a student that you have a relationship, you could talk to them. You could note that you've noticed the behavior change. You could note that, you know, hey, you used to get straight A's and I've noticed you're not turning in assignments. I wonder if anything is going on and there's something that could be helpful. It could be just exploring, you know, I'm wondering what's going on. I know this year is a really tough year. Is there something you need? Do you have support, or can I connect you to something on campus? And again, so this came up in some of the conversation. It can be on campus or off campus. So some students don't, for fear of stigma or privacy, they don't want to be on campus. So it might be trying to find referrals off campus. And there's places on campus that will do that for you. And if you have a conversation or notice concern, it's okay to check back and say, you know, I just wanted to check back. You know, I know we talked about how distressed you were, and I wanted to know how things were doing. And then make sure you can consult. So we at SCS and some of the other places on campus, we're available. So faculty can just email us and say, can I talk to someone about a student of concern? And we're happy to do that. Here, before I switch to this, any comments or questions? Okay, so we're going to go to the, and feel free to jump in, raise a hand, or chat if you don't mind. Student Counseling Services, that's us. We're in Appleby Hall. There's Boynton Health Mental Health Clinic. There are crisis resources. There's a CARE or BCT team. There's Let's Talk and Learn to Live. And I'm going to open up another, oops, a little touchy when I want to open this other page. Here we go. So it's just loading. Are you seeing a page loading that says Campus Mental Health Resources now? Okay, perfect. So on this page, I go through and I will provide this to all of you. It has the names of those programs we talked about. So SCS, there's our website, there's our phone number, our email address. You can connect with us through any of those ways and get started with services. Students can do that. SCS and Boynton Mental Health are the two probably biggest mental health providers, in that we provide individual and group counseling. So some ongoing services to students, a lot of similarities, a few differences. So I'm, after being here about 6 months, still learning all of those differences, but one of the main ones is our billing. So we do not bill insurance. We are free to students, whereas Boynton bills insurance. So students have to have health insurance. So that's one difference. Some students prefer going to a medical clinic and feel like that legitimizes mental health, so Boynton might be a better fit. SCS, we're a little, our setting is a little more casual. That might feel comfortable to other students. So again, that really it's preference of students of what is the right fit. We're both short-term models. We offer some amazing groups. So Boynton's website also provides information about some of their groups. And for them, it's clear that they want you to call for an appointment. That's how you get started there.
Michelle, can I ask a question about the billing aspect? Because this came up on our staff meeting the other day. Do students need to be paying the student services fee to access the counseling services?
So we serve students who are enrolled in classes. So it would usually be students who are paying that fee. So I recognize that some of your classes are non-degree seeking students. Is that correct?
Well, so our students have the opportunity to opt out. They don't have to pay the student services fee. They've opted out. Okay. But I'm just wondering then, does that limit them in terms of accessibility for counseling services?
Yeah, so and I think there's a little bit of a difference. Boynton, because they bill insurance, would have capacity for a wider range of students. Our students, it would be like full-time degree-seeking students in general, but we would provide a one-time consultation to any student. You know, so what we do, actually both Boynton and us, we do kind of an initial consultation, which is a meeting to really get a sense of what's going on, how you doing, what do you need, let's get you connected. And at that appointment, we could really determine eligibility. So, and that's for, I can speak much more for SCS because that's my home now, or my work home. We have prioritized since COVID is really seeing students as soon as possible. And we've been getting students in within 1 to 2 days for that just initial, how are you? Are you okay? What do you need? What can I connect you with? So that's been our priority. So I don't know if that fully answers your questions. There's kind of like there's the easy answer, and then there's some, it depends with some students. But feel free to call or email for further questions and on specific students. Next, we have these campus crisis resources. Just so you all know, there's 24/7 crisis line and a text line. And students have reported, from what I've heard, that they find this really helpful. So they're available, and that is 24/7. This is an important team for you all to know, the CARE team, or the CARE program. They are a group of folks, actually, there's, I think, 2 staff that do case management type services, but they have a wider range. So they can help students with food insecurity, with housing issues, mental health, stress management. So they can also make referrals to other places, either on campus or off campus. And then really important is this, there is a form online. So this is, I've referred many faculty this semester to this form, where it's like, if you're concerned about a student, what do you do? So you could say, I have a student that they showed up for 2 classes and disappeared and won't respond to email. You can fill out that form and they will make contact with that student. So that's a really helpful resource to know about. Our last 2, so let's talk, this is not quite counseling. So this is a great place for people who aren't sure that they want counseling. It's a little more informal. It's a kind of a drop-in, and we're doing this, all of these services in general are online at this point. So it's a remote drop-in service where they drop in, they can talk about things. There's no appointment necessary. And people come to that when they're not quite sure about counseling. Maybe they just have a specific thing to talk about, like, I'm worried about my roommate and I don't know what to do. So it could be something really specific, of like a question or a problem they want to talk through. And really important is that Let's Talk can be accessed by students outside of Minnesota. So that's another thing with mental health services. We've had some difficulty with who can we see and who can't we see. So even within SCS, there are some services only for students in Minnesota, and other groups and kind of forums that are available for those out-of-state students. So important to know that. This last one is Learn to Live. And this is on our website. Sorry, I can't get it to quite show the whole thing, but it's a really great resource where students can go on their own. And I think, again, with many of these students, they're so used to engaging with technology and apps and things like that. So it's a little bit like an app where you can come in, you can fill out an assessment or not, and then it gives you options where they use some cognitive behavioral techniques to help students work through things like anxiety, depression, things like that. Insomnia, I think, is another one. So really great resources. And I will again drop this into the chat at the end. I'm going to now switch back to the other PowerPoint here. Okay, that is not what I wanted to do. Okay, so I'm going to need to pop back into my PowerPoint over here. Any questions while I'm getting that back up?
I do have one question.
Great.
How would you go about like emailing one of your students that you're concerned about?
So say a little bit more about your question, like what would I say in that email, or how would I do that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, like what would you say? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I don't want, because I know some people, like some students would definitely be like super, I don't know, like withdrawn, or like really like, why are you even reaching out? And or they, yeah, like attacked, because I know that can definitely be a thing.
I think whenever you approach people with like kindness, and I think students generally, you know, this isn't always the case. If someone's in a really rough place, it might be difficult for them to hear a message. But if you come just saying, you know, I've noticed you're not showing up for class. I'm wondering if there's anything I can do to be of support. You know, so if you share words of caring and things like that, that could be helpful. Also offering like maybe to even meet in Zoom, I'm wondering if you could stay after class today on Zoom and just check in briefly or something like that. And does that seem to answer your question? Not quite. Say more. It's really important that we get to what exactly it is you're hoping for. Sorry, as I'm struggling to find this PowerPoint again.
I guess just like, I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. It's scary to think about like reaching out to someone and then like, that they probably, there's a high chance they won't even email you back, or I don't know.
I mean, that's the thing is, be careful not to put a lot of pressure on yourself, right? Again, you don't have to be the expert in this.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to, just reaching out can be really important if they don't respond. So I would say maybe do that once or twice. And if they don't respond to you, that could be a sign that they just aren't interested in really, talking about that at this point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And at that point, that's when I would consider, so if you're really worried based on something you've observed, getting some consultation or reaching out to that care team would be really important at that time.
Okay, because I don't want to be like that teacher that just refers the therapy option, or,
Right,
if that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. So I was both trying to find the PowerPoint and listen to you. We can offer, like, I think of it like this, it's like reaching out and offering. Students have a decision. So I even think about that. There are clients that I know that are very suicidal, and there's a limit. So if I can reach out, they have a right, unless there's imminent like risk for their safety, it's totally, they have autonomy to decide if they want to engage or not.
Okay.
So it even as faculty, for you to offer, hey, just notice you're not in class, or so it's like stating the observation, expressing the concern, and then offering a connection. And it can be, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to share some campus resources with you.
Okay.
And
I was saying I've not had much luck getting students to respond. I usually end up calling Tony.
It's good to have your own networks too, right? So there are many ways to do this, but we can only do what we can do, and this is an age group where students are really figuring out. They're on their own. Again, it depends on the age of the student, but the younger students, they're on their own for the first time. They may not be interested. I think of the working students, who may be farther along in life. They're busy. Maybe they're doing their own parenting. They don't have time to think about that. So we can offer and do the best we can. And know the resources and share the resources, and then students really have choice from there. Okay. So any other questions or comments? I'm going to pull my screen back up here. Okay. So this is the part where I want to get to talking about you all a little bit, because this is just a really, so I thought about this first. This has been a year that keeps giving, and now we're even into 2021, and the giving doesn't end, apparently. I'm thinking about that, and just thinking about all the demands on faculty, just in normal times, but adding remote learning, adding everything going on in the world, and the fact that we're all going through these things together, right? Different aspects of it affect us differently, but I looked at the CDC website just to say, like, so what would I say to faculty regularly, and what does the CDC say, COVID specific and mental health specific? So all of this are things that I would normally say, except for that first bullet point, that feels like that's something for all of us that's more prevalent. So I see this in the staff I supervise as well, where there's just a lot of fear and worry about everything from health to financial stability to loss of activities or things like that. If that gets out of the way or gets out of control and feels like it's interfering with your functioning, that's something to kind of think about. Do you yourself need support, right? So if that fear and worry is really kind of taking on a life of its own, getting in the way of your functioning. The other thing, just like we talked about with students, when there's changes, so I think of some of these as the basics. So if you yourself are noticing you're not sleeping or eating as well, not concentrating, having a hard time with either pain symptoms or health issues or mental health symptoms getting worse, using more substances, these could be indicators that things are they're weighing on you, and perhaps there's support that would be helpful for you. And to recognize, I think we're all experiencing some of this, or pieces of this, just based on the world being so different and our resources and our support systems being so different right now. So this isn't to pathologize, it's just like, these are things to pay attention. And I don't know if in the academic world you talk about this, I'm guessing not as much as the mental health world, but we really talk about, we need to be well, right? If we're going to be assisting others. And I would say in these times that faculty too need to be attending to just make sure you're okay in order to be, providing the best you can to the students. Here's another way to just an image to look at about just wellness. So this is kind of a wellness model, recognizing there's lots of aspects to overall wellness, everything from emotional, physical, social, spiritual, occupational. We want to have balance in these areas and make sure we're attending to them. So it's really important. And then the what to do for yourself. This might all be common sense, but hopefully just good reminders of making sure you're taking care of your emotional health, and that's really with support and those coping skills. I'm actually going to back up from this a little bit. So a lot of these are things I talk about with wellness all the time. One of my specialty areas is trauma work. And I feel like the whole world has entered trauma land. So why is that? Because there's so much lack of control, there's so much uncertainty, there's risk, both through the pandemic risk and racial violence risk, that there's a lot of fear of our safety. So that many of us are needing to tune in to what we in the trauma work world do all the time, which is thinking about the nervous system and people's nervous system activation. So what is really important right now are things like breathing, relaxation, taking care of, again, those basics become really important, your sleep, your eating, exercise, trying to find time to unwind or have fun every day. I don't know how many people are really having a lot of fun right now, but all of these things are things that can help us really kind of get into that more calm, regulated state, rather than, for many of us, the kind of heightened nervous system activation that comes from all this uncertainty in the world. Comments, questions from anyone? Are there things you're noticing from students that would be helpful to really talk about today, more specifically?
Well, Michelle, I have noticed instructors saying to me they're concerned because they have students who maybe they started their online course and then suddenly they just disappear, and the faculty will send email trying to contact the student and then never hear back. And so they're kind of concerned and worried about that. And I like, you have a slide, I think, that showed a place you can go to tell, oh, this student just suddenly dropped off. Is there something you can do to help? And so I think that's like going to be really crucial information to have. If you feel like you really want to do something, but you're feeling helpless, there is a place on the university campus that will help try to track that student down and see what's going on.
Right. So that, I will also send that link, but if you put in UMN CARE, C-A-R-E, it will bring you right to that CARE webpage. And then it will say, I think something like worried about someone or concerned about someone, and it'll link you to that form.
Great. That's going to be so helpful.
That is the most common thing that I have heard that comes through our emails, faculty asking exactly for that. Like, the student just disappeared, what do I do? And I know on the student end, we have lots of students who just say, I can't do this, I can't, I'm too worried about other things, or I can't concentrate, or I don't like this remote learning. So they are just dropping out. And I don't think they always know that. It would be great to let the faculty member know what's going on. Other things that you all are noticing that either are concerns or things that are going well, or that you're finding, because we can learn from each other about like ways to be helpful to students.
Well, I'm not sure if you would want to comment on this, but I also have had instructors say, Oh, it's a pandemic. Students are so stressed out. Is it reasonable for me to just tell people, you don't have to do this assignment? Normally it's an assignment that I would require, but because so many people are stressed out right now, I would just kind of like to eliminate a few, one or two, whatever, assignments. And so I'm just wondering if you have comments about that decision.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I'm sure that's a conversation that's been going on, and it's a difficult one, and I'm a little bit hesitant to weigh in, and yet I feel like I can a little bit from a mental health perspective. And from even our team, like just noticing with our team, we're talking about that, no one is doing great right now. Like we're maybe at varying degrees of okay. And how do we like manage our expectations for ourselves? Like we redesigned every single form and service and everything we've done this fall. So it's been a lot, and people don't have the capacity that they do. So we've had the same. So within a team, do we adjust our workloads or what is necessary? And we have made some adjustments based on the extra time needed to manage technology issues and other things like that. I know at the last university I was at, there was a lot of messaging to faculty about be lenient, be flexible. I did, but I think it was left to faculty to kind of, what does that mean? So does that mean maybe you give students a little extra time on things, or does that mean you cut out assignments? I would love to hear from this group on what are your thoughts about that? Have you been changing the workload in order to accommodate for the world we're in right now?
One thing I've done for my class is last semester, I kind of took the late work policies out of the syllabus and just kind of let it be more, get it. I mean, because most students would get it in on time, but those students who are struggling, I thought just give them the extra time to get things in and contact me. The other thing is I did take a little bit of the little busy work type assignments out that I usually have them do. I just thought, during this time, it's tough enough. Let's just focus on what we really have to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really took the approach of what is essential to this, to your duty as a faculty member to ensure that they get the content, removing unnecessary materials, and really like working within what felt right to you. So, how about other folks?
I tend to be fairly lenient if they talk to me and give me some warning. But I'm pretty hard if they just don't show and then come with some whopper of a story, 3 days late. But I still wonder what's going on with them sometimes.
Sure.
I mean, I only had one really good success where a student did honestly work with me, and we'd do video chats and I'd help him through the assignments, but that was a real rarity.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, that if students don't ask for help, it's hard to help them. And I feel like behind the scenes, that's something we're working on a lot of. Have you talked to your professor? Have you communicated anything about what's going on? So we do work on that, and some students don't know how or don't feel comfortable or have the skills to do that. Another thing faculty can do is to say, like if Dave, you mentioned, if they come back with a whopper of a story, to say, I don't, that's not my expertise to assess that, but if you wanted to go to the student counseling services and get some kind of a letter. So we do work with students where if we assess and would say that the student really has anxiety symptoms that are interfering with their functioning, that we could provide with their permission, something that says, the student is suffering with some mental health issues that are interfering with their functioning. Please allow some flexibility. So that would be if it's temporary. If it was more of a student who needed accommodation, we'd work with a disability resource center. So that's also, I didn't put disability resource center, but for students that have more chronic issues or potentially need accommodations due to mental health or even learning issues, the diversity resource center is the place to go. And we work together with them on that. Anyone else? Just noticing time. We have a little bit of time still. mean, I know that you all have probably rewritten almost all of your curriculum, or at least the delivery of your curriculum, so have had a big task this year. So just recognizing and appreciating you for that role. And it's got to be different. I know I don't feel quite as connected to a lot of the students over a virtual world. I'm sure that's been an adjustment for anyone who hasn't been already teaching online, that's been a big adjustment. Anything else? And then I have a evaluation that if you would be so kind as to fill that out, I dropped that in the chat, and then I'm going to drop this next flyer in there as well. You know what? I did not put my email. I'm going to drop that in here as well. If there's any questions, or if someone wants to talk about any particular students, oops, I just spelled it wrong. I'm going to put that in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me or just the counseling center in general. I'm happy to talk, about stuff going on with students, set up a time for consultation.
Is that evaluation different from what you have on Canvas or on the program?
Was that also, it could also be linked to GCal or the Google Calendar. Joan, I'm not sure. Do you have a separate evaluation?
We do have a separate evaluation. We could use yours instead, or we could use ours, whichever you prefer.
Either one. I apologize for that, Joan.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to be sure. So.
Thank you. That's a great question. I didn't even realize there were two. Joan, what would you prefer on that? I'm going to be flexible.
Well, we do have a link to that evaluation form on our Canvas site. So some people are going to be using it. So maybe that, if that's
just
okay.
Go with that. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will paste that link into the chat as well. So if that's more convenient for people than going to Canvas, you can do that.
Great.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for that question. And Joan, if you'd share, that would be great.
Yes, I will do that. Okay, there it is. And also on the Canvas site, we can publish a link to your slide presentation if you're willing to share that with us.
Sure. I'll send that by email, Joan.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Very nice to meet you all. Good luck in these times and be well.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michelle.
Bye, everyone.